My name is Tambien Sinclair, and this is ANN. We want to clarify that we had to skip a week due to some editing glitches, but we will do our best to cover the major news events of last week as well as this one. For the next few weeks, ANN will be on a slightly irregular schedule as we work on some improvements and getting back on track. And now, the news. It's been a week of leadership changes across the GECO and NONIT. In Concordia, Fellowship 9 called a vote of no confidence in Interim Prime Minister Quinel, or Let's Play Simances. Quinel had assumed the highest office in Concordia after the resignation of Prime Minister Fin 600 amid a swirl of domestic and international turmoil. The interim Prime Minister was overwhelmingly voted out of office, with over 70% of the votes cast in favor of calling for a new Prime Minister. Two major candidates emerged in the race to replace Quinel, Fellowship 9 and the lone Top Wolf X. Both candidates called for increased transparency in government affairs and clarifying the ways the citizens could contribute to the country. Top Wolf, however, also announced the formation of a moderate party in Concordia. The moderate party platform calls for Concordia to pivot from aggression to cooperation in international affairs and for transparency in the government. The election was extremely close, with Top Wolf and his moderate party carrying the day by a margin of one vote. In an effort to unify Concordia, Top Wolf appointed Fellowship 9 as his deputy prime minister and kept the cabinet that he had inherited from the previous prime minister. The effects of this rising reformist movement in Concordian politics have not been limited to the election for prime minister, though. The Concordian parliament passed a slew of bills and constitutional amendments during the last 2 weeks, focusing on streamlining the process of Concordian government and reducing internal conflict. Not all amendments passed, however, with amendments that would have granted more powers to the prime minister heavily defeated. In addition, Concordia has decided to reduce its claim significantly, giving up an estimated 50% of its former land. The border reduction was justified as a measure which would help both mend Concordia's frayed international relations, as well as allow for more settlement and trade opportunities into GECO. After the passage of the border reduction bill and the release of Concordia's reduced claims map, the new nation of Hackney announced its claims to the rest of Civcraft, claiming that they had been building on the land for some time. The Concordian Parliament also ratified the Treaty of the Tellus Pact, putting Concordia into an official mutual defense pact with the nation of Iria. The treaty also contains clauses dedicated solely to mutual pylon defense. In Aquila, the first of the staggered elections used to replace members of the Executive Council took place this week. Aquila is led by an Executive Council composed of 3 members whose terms are staggered and last 3 months. Zalbag was elected in a landslide to replace Public Frenemy as one of the 3 leaders of Aquila, pledging to create a strong Aquila through the establishment of a stronger pylon infrastructure and the auditing of the national treasury, as well as a stronger national defense. In Aurora, the newest attempt to establish a criminal code for the Auroran Republic has been defeated in the General Assembly. Written largely by Friedrich Hayek, the criminal code was a fusion of Auroran precedent and elements of other prominent legal codes of the past, such as that of Mount Augusta. The major objection to the proposed criminal code was the point system, a way of determining the maximum sentence, which would be determined by adding up the points assigned to each crime committed by the defendant. Aurora has been trying to write a criminal code and reform the justice system, off and on, since the resumption of the government in mid-2.0. Auroran politics have also been shaken once again by the surprise temporary abdication of Pantarch Pantosato 1066, citing real-life issues. In an unexpected move, he appointed Higginbottoms as the Pantarch Regent. The new Pantarch Regent will be vested with all of the Pantarchal powers and the responsibilities until the return of Pantosato 1066. This is the second time the Pantarch has temporarily abdicated the throne. The official regulations for water jousting were also released this week by the game's creator in Aquila, Eagle Nuggets. The extensive regulations seek to ensure the fairness of the competition, requiring trained officials, among other things, to watch over matches. This sort of specific regulation is uncommon in Civcraft sports, most similar perhaps to the unwritten regulations surrounding Auroran bare-knuckle boxing. Water jousting is a new sport in 3.0, consisting of armorless players in boats battling it out with wooden swords. The sport has rapidly gained popularity in Aquila and has begun to spread across the map. We'll be right back after this.
I got one question. How'd you fit all that in them jeans? You know what to do with that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Just a little bit of patty cake, patty.
Today I will buy things from the store.
We return now to the news and our main stories for these 2 weeks: controversy, raiding, and war into Chico and Nonnet. In Aquila, controversy has grown around the shop chest allegedly owned by Higginbottoms and the Black Hat's new mall behind their tower. According to Black Hat Mafia leader Scarred Warlord, Higginbottoms was scamming customers by selling normal clay balls under the guise of calling them basic reinforcements. Scarred Warlord requested a search warrant from Chancellor Kieran 6383 in the Auroran Slack and broke the chest after receiving the warrant. Higginbottoms has responded by claiming that the search warrant was unconstitutional and that we have no proof as to who the owner of the chest was. Higginbottoms called for the suit to be brought to civil court before he would argue the issue further. Although judicial cases would normally fall under the purview of the Pantarch, Pantastato 1066's abdication to Higginbottoms caused a clear conflict of interest in the judging of the case. As such, Pantastato 1066 also appointed a special judge for the case in his abdication post, Friedrich Hayek. Friedrich Hayek opened the trial post on Monday night, soliciting opening statements from both Higginbottoms and Scarred Warlord. Raiko has finally been captured after a multi-week reign of terror which began with his occupation of the Concordian capital of Alexandria last week, during the time period when Concordia was still recovering from the instability surrounding the resignation of Prime Minister Fin 600. Raiko and his group of raiders occupied Alexandria and the Concordian factory building for several hours, popping factories and chests, as well as purling Concordian citizens and government officials who attempted to defend the factories. Raiko and crew went on to hunt and pop factories across Civcraft, with Raiko finally being pearled by Aegis on Sunday. After Raiko was pearled, Malin posted to our Civcraft, claiming that Volterra had been funding the group for some time, directing them to attack certain countries. While this accusation is met with mixed reactions, there is historical precedent for an action somewhat like this on Volterra's part. In 2.0, Volterra and Alts raided Icenia in an effort to drive the nation into inactivity, and thus allow for a takeover. In a separate post, Malin suggested a connection between this historical activity and the more recent raiding of El Poco and its subsequent alliance with Volterra. Several sources close to governments involved in the matter have assured ANN that an investigation into the truth of the accusations is underway. In Nonnet, disagreements about pylon distribution in the Shard this weekend led to a military intervention in Thulian waters performed by Aquilan Rapid Response Forces. The conflict began when Aquilan officials noticed that another pylon had been unexpectedly activated in Nonnet, where pylon ownership is regulated by the Nonnet Agreement. The agreement, signed by the native Nonetian powers, divides the final pylon weight of the Shard between the major powers. Aquila has 60% of the Shard's weight, while Aurora holds title to 40%. After it was ascertained that the new pylon was non-Auroran, Aquilan and Auroran officials began to contact the other governments in the region in an effort to determine the pylon's origin. In a surprise move, Thule admitted to having created the new pylon in violation of the Nonnet Agreement, arguing that it had not signed any such agreement despite its previous assent to the terms. As discussions of the topic became increasingly heated, the Aquilan Executive Council met and voted unexpectedly to declare war on Thule in response to the pylon construction. Although not unanimous, the decision to declare war led to the dispatching of heavily armed Aquilan forces to the Thulian vault and pylon room. Within an hour, Aquilan forces had declared victory and returned home, leaving Thule in disarray. The Aquilan intervention was so short that Thule and Libra did not have a chance to activate their newly signed mutual defense treaty, with Aquilan forces withdrawing after Thulian forces dismantled their pylon during retreat. At production time, an unofficial ceasefire was in effect as Auroran leaders tried to mediate a settlement for the conflict. For ANN, I'm Tambien Sinclair.